We're back with Barstools Bourbon today. We got Jeremy, the Realtor over here, the Bourbon Realtor, and we got
Lahannah, who was basically a homeless person at this point that we drug in off the street, bribed her with booze.
She's a whiskey.
A whiskey enthusiast.
Welcome back.
Have you gotten your bourbon skewered yet?
Forever ago.
I have never seen the pin, so I don't know.
Oh, sorry. Next time I'll just wear it. I'll put it to my tiara.
Hey, I wear mine. I just forgot it. No, my Stephen, my cross thieves, I guess is what he does, not Stephen
I
thieves.
thought you had a tiara.
Yeah, my wife does that. We adorn her with jewels. But, well, Pat, some of the folks may not know you by sight. They certainly know you at this point by reputation.
Okay.
It's always interesting for me to see what happens when you take a rock star, you give him a PhD in molecular biology and all that other kind of good stuff, and then pair him up with a guy who's got a PhD in engineering. Is that right? You've got an engineering degree? Yep. And then you give him a bunch of booze and you say, let's do cool stuff with it. And so the brainchild of that has been born out here in Danville. And so we're really proud of everything you guys do. Lahannah calls me a fanboy because
He's a fanboy.
I just recognize great talent and great product. You know, she once called me.
It was really funny. We were at Limestone Branch, and right in the middle of their tour, Stephen Fonte, who is amazing, he was like,
he's
talking about
larger than life character.
He is 100%, but he was talking about yeast, and he was like, yeah, and there was this yeast strain in this 100-year-old jug, and then we took it to the one and only Pat Heist, and Jeremy's like, I know him.
I know Pat.
Oh my God.
Let me get him on the phone.
Come on, guys, I'm sitting right here. No, keep going.
Stop now. Come on, more. But so you guys are doing some interesting stuff. I caught wind of one of these bottles a couple months ago. Then it was top secret and everything else. Did a release, and you managed to acquire us a bottle through bourbon friend and fellow steward Adam Boothby out of Chattanooga. I believe he's connected in with the Bourbon Road guys.
Thank you, Adam.
So thank you very much, Adam, for the hookup on this one. But we're going to start with the 4-year-old over here.
Isn't he part of the Bourbon Group also?
Yeah, Bourbon Road. I gave
Bourbon Road.
Yeah, I gave the shout out. I'm a pro. I get paid nothing to do this show.
Well, I didn't hear it, and so I'll say it again. Adam Boothby with the Bourbon Road, just to make sure, fully acknowledged, because man, that was a very. I mean, this is a good example of the bourbon community.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and I know he does a lot of this kind of stuff. I've seen it on social media where somebody's looking for a bottle, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, Adam sent it to me.
Yeah.
So what a great guy, and I mean that's what it's all about, folks. Yeah. So take a lesson from Adam.
I'm super excited because Adam and I are both about to do the Eaves Blind for 2021. The thing Marianne Eaves is putting out.
You got the Eaves Blind.
Oh God, yes.
How did you get that Eaves Blind? Because it was like nomination, right?
Yes, it was. She was giving out like 50 of the subscriptions for people in the hospitality industry, and I was nominated.
Who nominated you?
Some weird guy.
Somebody. And from what I understand, you had to have a pretty impressive recommendation letter to go along with that.
So what I learned is Jeremy's really good with words. No, we really are excited though. I mean, we're going to share it with him.
It was my pleasure to nominate you, and I meant every single word of it. That's for you, Marianne. Don't cut her off. We want that. So. But yeah, so we're good to go. I love it. I love everything you guys are doing. So let's talk about this 4-year-old little experimental batch you guys are working on.
Okay, so people that know about Wilderness Trail know that we've got our 2 main bourbons. We've got our wheated bourbon and our high rye bourbon. Right. Both of those are 64% corn, 12% malted barley. The wheater's got 24% wheat. The high rye's got 24% rye. So every now and then we'll mix it up and do some experiments. So we actually did an experiment with our wheated bourbon where we put it in a special barrel from Independent Stave that had been routed out on the inside in a spiral pattern. We call them spiral barrels.
Okay.
And so this is just over 4 years old, and we just pulled it like this week. And so I just thought it was a good opportunity. Both are familiar with our wheated bourbon. Just a good opportunity to try a little bit of an experimental expression of this.
Let's not keep this secret and in the glass. So what's the science? What's the methodology behind the spiraling? What are we going for with it?
Well, I mean, if you think about what options do I have whenever I'm varying the barrel, you've obviously got the length of time that the staves have been air drying outside, so the seasoning of the wood.
Right.
Is it toasted? What level of char does it have? So going beyond that, what are your other options? You can modify the inside of the barrel. That's one thing. So this is an example of modification of the inside of the barrel.
Okay.
And again, it's really more of a just kind of a experimental thing. So a couple things that happen when you spiral out the inside is you break loose a lot more char, which stays in the barrel.
Okay.
I mean, there's a good bit, when you dump a whiskey barrel, there's a good bit of char that falls out of there. But this is a little abnormal amount of char in there. So the other thing that spiraling it out does is it digs in just a little deeper than the char level. So you actually have a little bit of what appears to the eye to be, wood that's underneath
Right.
it.
Okay.
So you get a little more exposure of that whiskey to what's underneath that char.
How deep are you going? I mean, is it like an inch wide, a quarter
It's
inch
a pretty
cut?
good. It's a pretty good route in there. I mean, it's enough to pull back the char and actually expose the wood under.
And
So
you guys you're a 4 char? Is that
we're
right?
a number 4 char.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So you're getting, in order to expose that wood, you're actually getting down in there pretty deep.
Yeah.
And so how tight is your groove? I mean, is it just like?
It's just kind of like a spiral. I would say it goes around the circumference of the barrel maybe 2-3 times.
Okay, so in rifling terms, I think it's like a 2.5 twist or something
Probably,
like that. Whatever.
yeah,
okay.
that'd be
All right.
about right.
So not like really
No,
tight,
no,
but just
that's
spreading
right.
it out a little bit more. Okay.
Okay, so
Gotcha.
when you went to dump the barrel, did it make it harder, like to filter it with all that extra char, like
Yep.
floating around?
Yep, actually it did. And there was even some fiber from the wood underneath, and so it actually kind of plugged up our screen.
Oh wow.
So,
Okay.
from a production standpoint, that may be something that, if we did a lot of these barrels going forward, we might put something else in place, like something we could pull up and dispose of or whatever, But definitely, anytime you do an experiment, you're kind of looking, what is that going to do to the flavor? But you also got to think, production-wise, is it going to slow us down for any reason?
Yeah.
So that was kind of
Well, I think that's these type of things I kind of really geek out about because Stephen Beam out at Limestone, he's got a metal trailer that he's got out there. It's his kind of mad
With all the
science
little barrels?
laboratory, yeah,
Mhm.
and it's full of like 15-gallon wood barrels. It's his mad scientist laboratory. I mean, it's just experimental. Let's try this. Let's try that. Let's try different mash bills. Let's age it different. Let's whatevering it. So these things are really cool. But you hit on an interesting point with not just distilling and aging it, but what does this mean from a production value? I mean, is it reproducible at scale? Because it's one thing to have one barrel, you pull it off, you've got 53 gallons, 200 bottles. Can we do this enough that we can slap a label on it and actually get it out there? And that's a whole different level of math at that point.
Well, and if you look at increasing the surface area inside decreases the width of those staves, and so
Right.
are you going to encounter more evaporative loss? That might be another thing that you would expect
Can't
to
have
see out
that.
of
We
this.
don't want to lose that.
No, and actually looking at like this particular barrel, and again, anytime you do an experiment to really get a good feel for is it doing something, what's it doing, how's it different from a normal barrel, you've got to have your test barrels, then you've got to have your control barrels. So
Right.
we don't have a control sitting right here with us.
Right.
But just looking at this barrel, this one bottle here, it says 147 bottles out of 215. Now, we'll get normal barrels that are even less than 215 bottles in a barrel, but this particular one is less than what we normally see at 4 to 5 years old.
So might
Typically,
even see more
we're
evaporation.
more. It could be, yeah. But again, this is one
Still within
barrel
that
worth.
variance of what you can
Normally
see.
we see closer to 250 bottles out of a barrel. This
Right.
is 215.
Wow,
Okay.
that's a big difference.
Yeah, we don't.
But like I said, we have seen non-modified barrels where we got even less than 215. So you got to sort of.
I'm gonna check this
Well, I've
out.
been sniffing this thing for like the last 5 minutes. I probably need to dive in.
Yep, I've got some thoughts on it, but I'd be interested to hear what y'all have to say before I jump in. Kentucky Chew. If anybody wants to know more about that, go back to the earlier episode.
And we'll link that right here in the YouTube thing because they let us do that now. It's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so on the nose, I feel like it is very similar to the regular wheated.
Okay.
It's like, it's very approachable. Just like, the classic whiskey, the caramel, the oak, it's good. To me, it's a little bit hotter, and I don't know why.
Okay. On the nose?
On
No.
the nose.
On the nose,
the
it's
nose,
not.
it's getting
Sorry.
me.
I skipped. On the nose, it feels very similar. Drinking it, it felt as if it drinks a little bit hotter than the regular waiter.
Okay. Yeah, I could agree with that. Now this one, just like a regular one, is
Still 100 proof.
it's 100
It's 100 proof.
so
That's what I
bottle
was
and
looking at.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting because it does. It feels hotter than 100.
Mm-hmm.
It does. It drinks a little bit hotter than that, but not in like an overwhelming way. It's just different.
Now I taste more. I hate it for it to be projection or anything else, but at the same time, I think I taste more char within this one. That it's almost like a darker flavor to it than what I'm used to with your regular 4-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as smooth, I think, as the regular 4 wheated. But there's I don't know if it's a nuttiness that I'm pulling on it or what I've got going on, but there was something kind of mid palate that was hitting me.
Yeah, there's something to this that reminds me of something that would have rye in it.
Yes.
I mean, it almost tastes like that's the one big difference I get between this exact bottle is there's a little bit of it's kind of like the spiciness that you get in something that has rye in it, but it's also just kind of it's almost minty. Like rye to me, and we're getting ready to try a really classic rye over here for comparison. But this has got a little bit of the mintiness of something that would have rye in it, but it's not. I mean, doesn't have any rye in it.
Yeah.
Right. And
Now, do you think that could be from the spiraling, or do you think that's just like differences between barrels? Because I know you can put like 3 or 4 barrels right next to each other and then pull drastically different flavors. Like we did with the Bourbon Steward course, we had 3. What was it? You're doing 4-year-olds, 4-year-old high rise, and those 3 there was one that had a big astringency, seemed to drink much hotter than the other 2, and then one was much more kind of caramel, smoother forward, and then there was one that was on the for me, it was just kind of faded next to the other 2. Do you think we might be seeing that, or this is just part of the mad scientist stuff?
Well, it's all those things are possible, and so at this stage of experimentation, we performed the experiment. We altered the barrel, we filled the barrel. It's aged for over 4 years, so that's the experiment. This is the data that's coming off that experiment. And so all these observations are things that now we write those down, and then we say, now how do we make sense of them? Is it the barrel? Is it the spiral?
Well, now, since you say that, I'm a huge fan of your all's wheat. And I guess that's like one of those preconceived ideas going into it. I'm thinking, okay, I'm drinking the wheater. Even though it's an experiment, when I say that it's hotter, maybe that's what it is. It drinks more like the high rye, like with the spice. And that's why I felt like it drinks hotter than the 100 proof.
Yep.
And
that's interesting.
I'm smelling more grass on the nose. That's what it is on the nose that I'm getting, is more grassy.
And again, this is just over 4 years, so maybe
So it might just be
it might mellow out after
younger,
a little more time. But again, when we do experiments like this, it's not like you got the bottle now and then you start drinking it and you just immediately know, oh, that's from the barrel, that's from the spiral, that's from
right.
I mean, there's still you got to put the pieces of the puzzle together before you really get to what. I mean, we've made observations about this. Now, what do those observations mean?
Right.
Those questions are pretty deep and would require a lot more observations.
So what are your? Yeah, that's a terrible job.
Another 100 barrels.
If you need
as soon as I taste through those.
If you need somebody to observe, you've got that's a lot of volunteer work.
We've got 10 to 20 employees rapidly tasting multiple barrels right now.
I'm
Get
sure.
to the bottom of this, trust me.
Go. So, what are your thoughts on this one? I mean, what your palate is?
Well, just again, this is a N=1 experiment. You know, in terms of
I
us
don't know
having
what that
only.
means.
That means our population of our experiment was 1.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
if we were tasting 5 different barrels of this, it'd be a different story.
Gotcha.
So first thing I can say is that it is a little uncharacteristic for what our wheat what our wheated bourbon normally tastes like. And some of the things that make it a little bit uncharacteristic are that little bit of spice, the little bit of heat that Lahannah mentioned.
Yep.
So, I mean, those are just kind of some of my initial thoughts.
Okay.
In terms of, like, given the fact it had so much barrel char in it, I don't see an enormous amount of barrel char at the bottom of it. So, you know, I would have expected to see more of that, which we're not seeing. So.
Is that because it was screened? I mean,
it
screen
was
really
screened, but a lot of times if there's a lot of barrel char
Still
in
get some
there,
residue.
it'll come to the bottom. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's great. One of the questions that always kind of bugs me, and I don't know if you want to get into this too much, but it's one of the things that when you're talking about aging and releasing, obviously you don't release everything that's 4 years old.
That's right.
Because you have to age it out. And I guess you guys are doing 4, 6. I don't know if you guys are doing 8, 10, or
yeah, kind of the next. Whenever it kind of turns that corner again, we're looking to do maybe even replace the 6 year. We're not really sure yet,
right?
But we're looking. You know, we'll be into 8-year-old stuff by the end of this year. So, you know, we'll start looking at 8 year. I mean, we definitely want to get to a 10-year, 12 year.
Yeah. That's the stuff that really just my brain just starts spiraling out of control. Spiraling out of control.
Like
yeah.
the barrel.
I mean, yeah, but you've got 25,000 barrel rick houses out here now, and to go through and say, okay, we're going to pull these and release those at this age, and then we're going to save these back. I don't know how you guys do it, and I don't know if it's just you just going like a divining rod and you just figuring stuff out, or you just tasting every single one of those things. But that's probably of the industry the part that trips me out the most the minute I start letting my mind start running on how you do that. To get to the point where you're like, 15 years ago, we looked at this barrel and we decided this one was going to be the one, or several decisions, this is going to be one that makes it to 15. I just don't.
Well, there is actually a very simple way to do that. And the way that I did that is get a business partner that's real good at math and fill out spreadsheets. So.
That works. I mean, hey, because I just look and I'm just like, you gotta be kidding me. How do you do that? Especially when you're blending and you're like, okay, here's the characteristic stuff. This is what we want. This is on this end. This is on this end. Put them together. This is now our 6-year-old or 8-year-old or whatever. My mind just explodes, and I'm like, you know what? I'm glad it's not my responsibility. I'm just gonna sit back and enjoy it.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I probably have a conversation about weekly is excited to see your all stuff at 8 and 10 years and things like that, because, you know, you all send us a lot of people at Copper and Oak off of the Bourbon Trail, and we get into big discussions about, everyone's always like, what's your favorite whiskey, this and that. And so I really don't have a favorite. Wilderness High Ride is my go-to, but I feel like I'm a little biased, but at the same time, it's a really good freaking product. So there's that. And I always tell people I'm so excited to see it at 8 year and at 10 year, because you see, like, a few years ago, like Henry McKenna 10 just sweeping awards.
Yeah.
This is it. This is the one to follow, because I would put the bottles on my shelf at home up against a Henry McKenna 10 year any day. So I can't imagine to see it with a little more age on it.
Well, that's one thing we were talking about, doing a specific blind flight, even on the show, and that we'll need some specific doctoring, a little help with from you. I'm not gonna put you on the pressure right now for that, but I know we've got some ideas on what we'd like to do, and say, you know what, let's do some blind flights, see what we can concoct.